Hey,
Hello, fellow Justin. Council of Justins is now in session here.
yes, the
Um,
Honorable Judge Justin presiding.
so, for those who don't know me, I'm Justin Jacobson. I'm one of the founders of the Restoration Games. My official title is Board Game Necromancer. Co-run the company with Rob Davio, and excited to be here today to talk about our latest project, Battle Monsters, which is live on Kickstarter. Kickstarter now. You can find the link in the description and head over there and check it out. But we're here to answer questions, give you a closer look at some stuff, and let me introduce you to my partner in crime, Justin. Why don't you introduce yourself, newest member of the design team? Go ahead and say hello and introduce yourself for us.
Hey, everybody. Good to be here. Good to talk to you today. I'm Justin Kempinen. I am the Supreme Adjudicator of Mirth at Restoration Games, the newest member of the design team, as Justin mentioned. I have a storied history of design and development in the industry, working with Fantasy Flight Games, E-Man Games. I even have a little side gig of my own.
You can plug it. It's all right.
Okay,
Great
all right.
company, great games too. So.
So I'm one of the founders of Mooncrab Games, whose debut game was Leviathan Wilds. Coincidentally, another large creature themed game, but maybe I've got a niche. Who knows?
And Justin's on here today because he's been sort of the lead within the team on the Battle Monsters design, game design. We wanted to have him on for his expertise. He knows the system inside and out. He's been playing it nonstop for quite some time.
Quite some time.
Yeah. So, as I said, this is a Q&A, so feel free to type your Q's into the chat there. Suzanne is running things behind the show. She will post your questions, and we will answer them. That's why we're here. And then obviously we'll show you some other stuff. I think one of the big things I just wanted to talk about, and we'll get to the first question there, but one of the things I wanted to talk about is just how much effort goes into this game. We've been working on this for about 2 years now. I remember I went to the licensing expo in Las Vegas 2 years ago, and I met with the people from Legendary, and we started talking about doing something with the MonsterVerse. And I was a huge fan of the IP, and we started talking to them. And I wanted to. The first thought was bring it to Unmatched. That was our first thought, but we quickly realized it just didn't work due to the scale of those monsters. And we had Battle Masters as an old game, was one that we sort of had in our back pocket as one we wanted to consider bringing back at some point. The original is this ginormous battling game, and it seemed like a perfect fit. Stephen Baker, who's also on the Restoration Games team, was the original designer, so there was some good karma there. And we've been working on it ever since. So again, very excited to to talk about that today. Let's start with the fun question first. How many times have I seen the movies? We're talking specifically about the MonsterVerse movies. I've seen all of them, of course. I have seen the most recent one probably about 5 or 6 times, mostly because, and maybe not all the way through, maybe that's not a fair assessment, but it's also all the movies I think are some of those movies where if you're clicking around and you see it's on, you're like, yeah, I'll watch the rest of this, or I'll watch this while I'm cooking dinner or on the treadmill or whatever. Those are movies for that. So I've definitely watched, and that's probably the one I watched the most. But also the original Skull Island one was a big one for me. Justin, I know you're not quite as
Yeah,
big a MonsterVerse fan as me. No shame there, but I know you've also immersed yourself in the media. So
yeah. You actually kind of nailed it with the treadmill slash exercise bike. As part of doing some more research on the game, I used it as an exercise bike game film for a little while.
you know, do
Just
not
to
try to play Battle Monsters while you're on the treadmill. Just,
hey, it's a dexterity game as well as a battling game. No, and yeah, so I watched through it probably 2 or 3 times, just really trying to get a sense of the big moments and those sorts of things that we wanted to pull into the game experience.
I think we have to ask. Maybe someone would have asked this, but I'll jump the gun here. Who's your favorite Titan?
My favorite Titan is Kong. I just like Kong. You know, he's got the sign language going on. He's got the empathy and human intelligence going on, which makes him a little bit more of a dynamic character. And I'm all about story and character and such, so it gives him a bit more for the non CGI portions of the film to chew on, so that the actors are interacting a bit more. So I don't know, just a little bit more intrigue there.
Well, let's jump into these questions. So Willie Man asks, why the Godzilla IP? Why Legendary as opposed to Toho? He loves both, as do I. Were the kaijus ever considered as large fighters for a match? So we'll take the second question first, because I sort of answered that a little bit. And again, that was our original plan, was to put this on Unmatched. And we just couldn't figure out a way to have it make sense. We were thinking about doing like a whole different play mode, and it ended up being a different type of game. And again, as I said, it wasn't just that we couldn't do Unmatched, is when we stumbled onto this idea of doing it for Battle Masters, even the name sort of like immediately came to me. I was like, this is such a perfect fit, because they have like one in Battle Masters. Each faction has one big cool unit and then a bunch of supporting troops running around. So it just really kind of fell into place as a really good fit for this IP, and we sort of never looked back there. As far as Toho, big fan of the Toho movies, in particular, the most recent Godzilla -1. I always forget what it's called. Godzilla -1.
Yeah,
was amazing. Really, really great movie. Love that one too. And as with all these, like, it's the same. You know, we get the questions about, you know, what about Rodan or Scar King or Shimu or whatever, right? There's only so much we can do in an initial offering, and we do think the system is super robust. That's one of the things we're really excited about, and we hope that the continues to be successful in the Kickstarter. We could definitely see doing some other IPs, whether that's other kaijus, Toho, other legendary IPs, or something completely off the board. All right, Seasonal Dragon asks, will Battle Masters be going outside of Godzilla in the possible future? My precognition is on high effect today. Not the biggest Godzilla fan, but I'm interested in the gameplay and how's the solo play work. So again, to reiterate, yeah, we definitely, if it's successful and we're off to a great start, we've talked about doing all kinds of IPs. Certainly some sort of giant mech IP would be great, and there's plenty of those. We thought of some cool ideas for fantasy things, to take it back to its roots a little bit. But also the question about solo play is great. And I know actually you're knee deep in doing development on that as we speak, the finishing touches on that. So why don't you talk about solo play a little bit, Justin?
Yeah, I can chat about that a little bit. So primarily the goal of solo mode is to maintain the high pacing of the game, which has always been one of the goals. It's a very high octane, exciting game about punching monsters, stomping on cities, blasting buildings, that sort of thing. So the goal was to preserve that as much as possible, so you're not making a ton of excessively complex decisions for the Automa side of the game, but that it's still producing an interesting sort of puzzle for you to solve, a dynamic battlefield for you to engage with. So step number one is we've got each of the factions has a board, the sort of flip side of their command board. You know, the command board, the big one, that's the size of my head here. You'd flip it over to its other side, and it would give you all of its instructions. Obviously, it's not on this side, but because we're in still a development phase for it. But you flip it over to the other side, it would give you a lot of the instructions for how to activate those enemies. It would give you alternate versions of what the different resources do. So the overall way that would work is, as the AI is taking its actions on the field, it's gaining these resources, which are going to give it alternate activations, which give it bigger buffs to what it's doing. And if you let that get out of hand, if you're letting them collect too much, that bar fills up, and they get something special based on their specific, the specific faction. So as an example, the mercenaries, as they are in the films, are kind of, they're like eco-terrorists. They're kind of trying to awaken the Titans in order to reset the world. So their goal in the Automa mode here is to destroy a lot of buildings. So every time they fill up that resource bar, and if you're not controlling them, using them, they're going to destroy a building. And if they get to a certain number of destroyed buildings on the map, they automatically win. in addition to the regular victory condition of their Titan, which doesn't have to be King Ghidorah. We finally found a way to split those things so that you can mix and match the solo Titan and the solo faction. If they just happen to beat your Titan into the ground, they still win as well. So beyond that, it's a lot of just kind of making it so that the troops have a fairly robust but also streamlined and simple decision tree for what actions they're going to perform, whether they're going to attack or whether they're going to go try to claim some more resources to push their victory condition along. But overall, it gives it a little bit of a scenario feel. So Monarch's faction, for example, instead of doing building destruction, they're trying to get their Titan to evolve as quickly as possible, because Monarch is very much about sort of preserving the natural order. That includes the Titans as a major part of the world order. We've got plenty of ideas for how to implement the other factions as well. So that's kind of the gist of it. Any specific things I missed on that, Justin?
No, I think, yeah, I mean, just fundamentally, so Seasonal Dragon says it sounds kind of like the boss in UMA. That's a good sort of analog, I think, the way we approach Unmatched versus Unmatched Adventures, which for those who don't know, is what UMA is. It's a cooperative mode for Unmatched that you can also play solo. Is the whole point is you're never going to be able to make an automa that's going to play as well as another person. And a lot of times when you try and do that, you're also forcing the person who's playing, the solo player, to make decisions and things like that. So the whole goal of the solo mode is to create essentially a puzzle for you to solve. And so it's about designing the smoothest, quickest way to just keep in that action, as you say, to keep that high octane feel, but present a challenge that doesn't require the player to play themselves. And I think we're really getting close to it. We're doing, like I said, we're putting some, oops, excuse me, my chair just adjusted there. Putting some of these final touches on it. We're excited about what it is. So
that's a really good way to put it. That's probably the biggest challenge that we faced with making that adaptation was, in a traditional like head-to-head game, there's a lot of forward thinking, there's a lot of strategic planning, there's a lot of things that a player needs to do in order to work against their opponent in that sense. And it's possible to do that from the perspective of a solo, of an automa player, but then you're spending a lot more time on their decision making than you necessarily would be on your own. So really trying to make sure that it maintains the same pacing, the same feel as playing against a human player. So
I think this is a good time to just jump in. I'll get to Annihilator's question in a second, but it's a really good time to jump in, and I think I will just freely admit this. This is, how the sausage is made. This game has proven to be an absolute beast to crack this design on. And what I mean by that is, we thought we were done with this game 6 months ago. We had the design, but it sort of speaks to the team. And I'm going to brag a little bit here. We have an amazing team at Restoration Games, from the design team to the artists to all the logistics people, marketing, Suzanne and Beth and whatnot. We are never satisfied with, like, this game's pretty good. We're always trying to go that extra mile, do that last little tweaking, whatever. And for us, we thought we were basically done because we were right there. And it turned out that the last 10% has taken 90% of the time. We do feel like we finally got there, and we're super excited about that. And I would say for solo mode, we're in that last 10%. It's proving to be a little bit smoother because we have the core system down now. But making those final few refinements, and that's why Justin doesn't have any hair. I'm not going to lie. No. So we'll go back to Annihilator's question there. Will King Ghidorah and Mothra be getting adjustments to match their movie looks? King Ghidorah's left head horns are supposed to be straight. The middle head has 2 rows of spines going down his neck. So yeah, that's one of the reasons this is also a good point to mention. This is a licensed game where it's our first time working with this licensor. Excellent show and tell here. So first time working with this licensor. And what's super interesting about this license is that there's actually a sub-license involved, right? Like, so there's the original owners of most of the Titans, Ghidorah, Mothra, Godzilla, of course, is Toho. And so Legendary has licensed from Toho, and then we are sub-licensing from Legendary, which means there are really 2 licensors involved. And so part of the reason why this campaign got pushed back a couple of times is when they started doing it, they both made recent announcements, a new movie announcement from Legendary, and then 70th anniversary for Godzilla. Sizzle reel dropped from Toho. That was pretty cool, featuring the new roar. And so basically, we're constantly refining them. And so there were some last minute tweaks that they wanted. And I will tell you this right now, these are not final. I know we've said that a billion times, but they're expressly not final in the sense that there have been things they said, hey, we're going to need you to tweak these, but this is okay for the Kickstarter. And so, yes, the models will get tons more revisions, both in terms of getting them just right for the IP. But I will say, ultimately, like there might be some people say, oh, we wish it were, this color in the illustration, or we wish it, was this version of this Titan. Is we don't have a lot of choice there, and we're under the dictates of what the licensor tells us. And to go into Willie Man's questions, he likes to evolve Pink Godzilla. And then, we sort of, you probably saw some leftover graphics somewhere where that was the original thing. And then we went to this blue and gray version that was dictated by the licensor. Yep. So ultimately, they're going to tell us which version we can use and that it looks the way they want it and all that. We're going to try and make it as beautiful and artistic as we can within the confines of what the licensor requires. But ultimately, it's their decision. And for things like getting the horns right and the spines right, for sure, that stuff will get tweaked to match that. I think specifically the spines was one of the things that they mentioned, and we actually have since corrected, but I don't know where that corrected version is showing up in things. It may not even be out yet. But yeah, these are things that we're constantly working on, constantly changing, and ultimately we'll get some final approval.
Well, sort of another point about like the sausage being made is like these miniatures, and here I'll hold it in the palm of my hand. I don't have small hands, and this is how big it is. Here it is next to my head. Likewise, I don't have a small head, and this is how big this thing is. But like these were produced, a while ago. As he was saying, it's work in progress, and so we're constantly looking at like, what does the licensor want? What do we want? How is this the exact right pose that this should take? How does it fit on the board? Does its wingspan start to impede some of the spaces around it? Does it? How does it like overall feel? Does it actually feel big? Yeah, how does it fit in the box? Like all these things are critical to not just creating a fun game, but an overall really good like product, a good package, a good everything. And just one more time next to my not small head. Here, I can get one more of them in here.
Don't put it too close to your head. Those spines are super sharp.
I can take it, and here's Godzilla. You can tell, like, he is an extreme.
That's a great example, though. You turn it to the side, like the tail spikes on the spine. Those we had to adjust beforehand because we didn't get the detailing on the spines quite right, and that was something that they actually felt pretty passionately about before we even launched the Kickstarter. Not just talking about for final production.
Yeah.
So I will say this. I'll say this. It is on the one hand, it can sometimes be frustrating working with licensors, right? Because you want to just make the game. But it is great to see when a licensor is passionate about their IP because you know that's going to end up making for a final product that's not just going to be better in general, but really, do well for the fans who are also love the IP. So. All right, Gary. Does the licensing with Legendary Toho preclude you from pursuing licenses with other entities? Gamera, Ultraman. I was looking at Gundam. I thought Gundam would be pretty cool. I'll just throw that out there. And of course, somebody else mentioned in the chat, Legendary has the rights to Pacific Rim. So to be clear, there's nothing preventing us from doing another Battle Monsters with a different IP, much in the same way that we do Unmatched. So again, it would be a situation where we couldn't mix those IPs in a particular product, marketing, things like that. They would be very careful, but there's nothing preventing us. We have the rights to Battle Monsters, the system, the trademark and whatnot. There's nothing preventing us from doing a Battle Monsters, Toho edition next year or 2 years or whatever makes, down the road, or 10 years for that matter. Bill Nye the Playa. Okay. Which of the 5 Titans on the Kickstarter is your favorite to play as? Well, that is a different question. You want to take that one first, Justin?
I, at the risk of repeating myself from earlier, my favorite right now is actually Kong. because a lot of his emphasis is on speed and maneuverability. So he gets to just kind of monkey his way around the map and just be very elusive and very agile. And it just makes for a really interesting, for me, an interesting puzzle. Is like, where am I going to put Kong? What's he going to be doing? What do I want him doing next turn, and how do I want to position him to be better in that regard? So I find Kong particularly fun to play. How about you, Justin?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm not quite sure. I think I want to say Ghidorah, although it's funny because probably played with him the least, I would guess. I don't know. But I do. He has these rubble tiles. So again, I'm not sure. We've seen some questions on this. So to clarify, each Titan is unique. They have their own custom command board, so they all have the same commands and the same sort of base stats, but they're all modified. So when you activate your Titan, you're choosing a specific command. They all have this sort of basic on the move, which is sort of your basic, like you're just gearing up for your next turn kind of thing. But then the other three commands are completely unique and custom to that Titan, both in terms of the mobility, how much damage they're dealing, the effects that they're doing, all that stuff. And so a lot of Ghidorahs will do something, and then he gets to throw some rubble tiles out around the battlefield, which he can plop them on top of troops and deal damage to them, and they change the landscape of the battlefield so that if a troop enters a rubble space, a non-flying troop, they have to stop moving. And so things like that, I can't remember now if that's where we ended up on rubble. We might have changed that rule, so don't hold me to that. But in any case, it affects how the battlefield works. So I find him to be a lot of fun. Yeah, they're all fun though, because again, they're different. It's not quite like Unmatched, but it has a similar thing where you're definitely gonna get a different play experience. Lone Sup says, any chance for a non-deluxe version in the future, something much smaller but in a compact box, perhaps acrylic standees instead of these mega minis? Listen, there's always a chance. Obviously we know, we read the comments, and it's not even, the comments weren't even surprising to us. We know that this is a high-priced item. And ultimately, as I think I mentioned in the update, like there's a different universe where we made some version of that. It certainly just didn't feel right for this IP as an initial launch. But yeah, we've done stuff like that before. I could see doing something like that. I don't know that it would be with the same IP, but I don't know. It's possible if Legendary is up for it and we think it's gonna do well. I mean, ultimately we have to pay a license on this, so we would need to think about it as a commercially viable product. Sometimes we've had situations where a big box store, like a Target or something, will say, hey, we'd be interested in carrying a lower price point version of this, and other companies have done that. Something like that is definitely possible down the road for sure. Willie Man says, when you restore a game like Thunder Road from a company like Milton Bradley or something like that, what has been the hardest contract deal to get? So that's interesting. So Thunder Road was not really working with Milton Bradley. That had gone out of publication. That we licensed from the original designer, Jim Kiefer. And that was fairly easy. It was very nice to work with him. He's a nice guy, and we've actually worked with him talked with him about some other projects and things like that. He's a cool guy. I'll say this, when people ask this question a lot, this is probably one of the most common questions I get. I'm a lawyer by trade, by background, for those who don't know, and I handle all the licensing and the contracts and all the boring stuff. But I will say this is one of the most interesting parts of the job, because every game that we consider bringing back is different. Sometimes we have to deal with the original publisher, sometimes the original designer, sometimes the original designer is not credited. Sometimes the design is so old that either makes it more harder, or we don't need to worry about it. We can just do it. We had Dinosaur Tea Party was an uncredited design published in the 60s, I think. I can't remember now. So we just did it. Like, we didn't have to do anything. But Thunder Road was direct license with Jim Kiefer, the original designer, and not too hard. I will say, it's funny, the hardest one was the first one, Stop Thief, because we had to deal with Hasbro then. So. But it worked out. Board Game Last. What was the biggest change in development from the initial idea to where you are now? Something you expected to do or include that ended up being different? That is a fantastic question. I don't know if you have one off the top of your head, Justin. I'm going to think about it too, because we've changed quite a bit. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've heard stories of what the game was even before I was brought onto the team. But I think the biggest thing from my perspective uh, regarding that is the number of given options for everything's activation. Like the player boards, or excuse me, the troop command boards and the Titan command boards used to have a lot more text and a lot more individual options. So every single troop used to have several different abilities that they could choose from. And while it was mostly interesting that you choose one of the two commands, it pushed, especially for the troop side of things, it pushed a lot of the focus of the game onto the troop battle itself, where you were making decisions based on that. And it was also a lot of information and text to just parse as you're sitting there at the table trying to figure out what you're doing. It's like, oh, I'm going to activate my Argo here, and I'm choosing between these two major abilities. And then I'm also choosing where I'm going to go with the thing, and the troop battle ended up just being a larger portion of the game. And the game's not called Battle Troops or Battle Monarch Mercenaries, it's Battle Monsters. So one of the things we needed to do in order to make that work a little bit better was to keep those decisions interesting, but slim them down enough so that they're not taking up too big a percentage of the game. And I think that's kind of every single decision along the path of the game was trying to make sure that the Titans were taking a good chunk of the attention in the game, because they deserve it. That's what we're all here for, is to watch them stomp around and smash buildings. And
I'm like looking. So we have a master sheet, a Google sheet that we put everything into, and I'm looking back. Keeps doing that. I'm looking back at the scratch pad, which is where we throw everything that we get rid of, and it doesn't go quite back as old as some of the original designs. But I'm just looking at some of this stuff that we were doing, some of the original powers and how they worked and the names of them. Like originally, the sites were, we didn't really have resources. The sites had the effects themselves. I know that was a big thing.
yeah.
And again, the whole action system was way different. Yeah, it was that's
yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say, so
Yeah.
that's been it used to be for you just get actions and you decide what you want to do with them. And so finding that balance, that sweet spot is that last 10% I've been talking about, to get it just right so that it's really humming. Great question, though. I mean, it's funny, if Noah's in the chat, I don't know if Noah's watching, but I guarantee you Noah has
Oh, he's
something
probably
that
got
he will
half dozen.
remember from an early design that I'm blanking on right now. Bill Nye the Play asks, is the box filled to the brim, or if you take out the insert, could you fit more than 2 Titans in one box? Boy, my guess is no, only because, like, volume-wise, you probably could. Like, the biggest issue with these is, and what makes them cool, we can show them again, is right. They take up a lot of space three-dimensionally, right? But it's not like they're cubes, right? So if they were cubes, I would say the answer is no. But there's negative space within the cube of their outer dimensions. Is there some way to jigsaw it together? I don't know, but I certainly wouldn't try it. I'd
So
be shocked, but I don't know.
it occurs to me, we had a get together
Just to be clear,
last.
those models that he's holding up are those. That's the actual size of the models. Like these
Yeah,
are the,
yeah.
when I don't know. Just to be clear, so everyone understands that.
We had a prototype box at this gathering we did. This was sometime 6 months, 9 months ago. What is time anyway? But the way that it was transported is that all 4 miniatures were Tetrised and carefully wrapped to fit inside the sort of main box. And I suppose you could do that, but then I don't know if you'd be able to fit the other components in there. They were transported separately, so like they are really, really big, and the box isn't small either. So
Yeah, I mean the biggest thing is it's the other components, right? Like, could you just get 4 Titans in a box? That's what I'm saying. I'm not sure, but maybe. But you wouldn't, and at a minimum, so the game board is actually 2 boards, 2 full 6-panel boards. So for those of you who played Downforce, one of our other games, It's two of those side by side. Oh, I didn't realize we had this as well. The one that comes in the box is double sided. This is the prototype that only has it on one side. That is
This is
half
only
of the
half.
board.
This is
So
half
it's
of
two
them.
of
Yeah.
those side by side. And again, when you fold them up,
Sure.
though, that's 6 panels thick. And you've got two of those, obviously, if you've got two sets. So it's quite a bit. I see Noah's answering in here. Maybe Suze will put that up. Yeah, there we go. I knew there was something with cards. I just couldn't remember what it was.
Oh.
So, yeah. As you can see there, there was something. I knew there was something with the way we handled cards, and then we moved them onto the command boards. Like originally, we didn't have the command boards with the actual commands on them. So.
Command boards, and they've got. I'm not sure if this is reflected from my view, but yeah, there's commands for each of the different troop types, and they each fit a niche that works together for the faction's overall identity.
Lone Sup says everything is big about the game, haha, but really fits the theme honestly. Yes, and so that was the fundamental question, right? Like when we first sat down to sort of make the game, and something we worked on. I'm not gonna lie, the Titans originally were even bigger, and we're like, that's a little too big. And it's funny because you sort of have a concept in mind, and you think about like, well, we know it has to fit on a table. That was like one of the big things. We didn't want people to have to play on the floor like the original. So that gives us a bit of a constraint. And then what's a size Titan that would fit on that kind of board, and then the troops and all that. And a lot of it is then we finally get the 3D prints and we get them out on the table can make a big difference from even what you're envisioning in your head. And so we want them to be big because, and then originally, like, how small can we make the troops? But so that the scale seems appropriate. I'll give you a hint, it's not. Like in the real world, those troop minis would be even smaller, but then they would look too small. You wouldn't be able to see any detail. So we scaled them up a little bit just so that the relative scale looks right on the table. So it's fun to play with and all that, but it makes some sense, as it were.
There's the Argo next to Godzilla. Let's see if I can get a better angle. Or
yeah.
I can get...
We spent a ton of time on this, getting the scale right.
Some tanks, and they can fit right underneath.
That's probably not a safe place to hang out, just FYI.
Well, you know, depends on what Godzilla ate for dinner, really.
Yeah, worth mentioning, like all these are non-final, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, you'll see there those health pegs are a little big. You know that.
Yeah.
So we shrunk those down.
Yeah.
And again, that's the attention to detail, right? Like they need to be easy to use, so they've got this texture, so they're not fumbling. You know, if they go on the table, they won't just roll off. But they're not so big that they're blocking what troop it is, et cetera, et cetera. So Suzanne S says from the Kickstarter comments, could there be a way to play 4 players with 4 monsters factions, team, free for all, whatever? We saw this question come up a couple times. I will freely admit we've been so focused on the core design, the solo mode, things like that. We haven't even thought about this stuff really, but it's something we would certainly look at. So Justin, why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, the nice thing is that we've gotten to a place where the design is pretty flexible overall. So I think it wouldn't even necessarily be, it's something that someone at home could take their components and mix and match them together and just, and make it work. So being able to start from that position of like, yeah, this could probably work if you just sat down and shove things together. I think it's absolutely possible that we could make that work. Now, what we'd be looking to achieve with that is trying to make sure that it is the best experience that it can be at that like player count, at that concentration of troops. Because if you did dump all the Titans and all of the troops for every faction on a single board, you might be looking at a very congested map. You might not have enough buildings to work with in order to gain resources. Energy is going to be a little bit more constrained in that regard. But if we were able to, kind of pick a little bit of a middle ground, probably just keep the Titans on and reduce the number of troops is the first place I'd go with it, just to make sure that the game was a little bit more functional in that regard and didn't get really like bogged down in that type of thing. But it would work. Like it just might take a really, really long time to play the game. Like I think you could totally play it.
Yeah, I think it's a good example of like, a lot of times when we're doing design work and things like that, it might end up being like cool for like a play, but not something that you want to put in a commercial product like that you're sending
Yeah.
out to the public, right? So who knows? It might be something that looks good, and we end up throwing it as like an official variant in the rule book. My guess is it's more likely, but we'll see that it ends up being something like, hey, try it at home and have fun with it. Like, it's your game now. I say
Yeah.
that to people all the time. Once you get it, it's your game. And, you know, we get people asking questions on Board Game Geek and whatnot. I was like, yeah, it should work. Give it a try. Like, we have people doing all kinds of crazy stuff with Thunder Road Vendetta, and they seem to be having fun with things that we wouldn't want to put in our commercial product, but people are having fun
Yeah.
with on an individual basis. So.
I think that's just overall an important note for our design philosophy as well. Is we're not going to put in official rules for something if it's not up to the standard of quality that we want to put out. So, like, as cool as it would be, you know, making it an official thing or something like that is not likely to be what we do, but we would work on it. We would try to see if we could make it work and just get another piece of the of another way to play the game into your hands, because that's something that we look for. It's something we try to give you as much value. I mean, it's a huge game. We want to give you value out of it.
All right, so Suzanne, you posted this one up at front and then realized it was such a downer to talk about. She was going to save it for later now. So big question is Terrace. Yeah, we knew, and this is another thing, right? Like, we knew when we were launching this that this was going to be a big question. I guess we're fortunate that there's at least a pause right now. That's nice to see. Hopefully that'll hold, or something firmer. Ideally, we'll get it put into place. That's pretty realistic. I'm not going to get into all the rigmarole of the tariffs, but I do say, obviously, we're, as a business that's being hit by them, is something we talked about, you know, spent countless hours discussing, not just relative to this Kickstarter campaign, but to our business as a whole. And fundamentally, I will say this: we designed this project as we were leading into the Kickstarter campaign, not the game itself, but the Kickstarter campaign, under the 145% tariffs. So it is designed, you know, essentially as a worst case scenario, if we were to somehow go back to that doesn't change anything. So I want to get that out of the way. We will not be coming to ask for additional money if tariffs go up or anything like that, additional shipping, nothing like that. When we tell people, here's what you're going to pay, we do that. We have never come back and asked for additional funds, and we never will. That said, you know, it might impact other things. I've mentioned this in some other places, but if, for example, tariffs were back at 145%, the plan was essentially not to put this game into regular hobby distribution, where we get a much lower cut of things. So it's very complicated and lots of moving parts there. But the fact is, you know, this is such a big game. There's so much stuff in this. I mentioned this in the update, right? Like, normally we do stretch goals. I've said before, I love stretch goals. I think they're a ton of fun. You know, and sometimes it's, you know, like upgrading components or putting more content in or things like that. But when we were sort of, our first plan was like, hey, let's make the list of the stretch goals we think we can do for this game. And when we were looking at that list, and then the game we were designing with this IP and the scale of the game, it's like, this stuff should really just be in the game. And so we designed the whole project around that, you know, and changed certain things around and certain offerings and things like that. But basically, you know, that obviously leads to the higher cost, and that ultimately drives the price, and that price is going to be, you know, affected by those tariffs. But again, we've spent countless hours working on that, designing around that, planning for that, so that you as a consumer can just say, here's what I'm paying, and I know I'm going to get this cool game next year. And that's what we want to make it for the consumer, that they just need to worry about having fun with the game, right? Oh, great question, Willie, man. I actually wrote myself a note to talk about this, and then I forgot to look at it again. So now we know more about the classified files of character cards. So first things first, let's start with the name. Sort of a work in progress. Right now we're calling them classified files, and they're sort of done as, this is very secret sneak peek. I'll tell you why here. So the very last thing before we launch the campaign, we have all this cool art of all these great characters, the human characters in the movies, which that's one of the things I love about the Monsterverse movies, is they have these big epic Titan moments, but there's this sort of underpinning where the humans are affecting and being affected by that grand plot. Great actors, and you know, all these are some, you know, great actors in there and all that. But those are also the people that you sort of associate with, right, in the movie, that you're sort of seeing the movie through their lens. So we knew we had to get them in the game. And originally, this is actually one thing I can talk about that was an original design before you got on board, I'm pretty sure, Justin. Originally, the characters were going to be assigned to a specific troop. So, like,
Oh yeah.
Bill Randa was going to be on the Argo or whatever, right? And
Hmm.
flying around. And if the Argo gets destroyed, Bill Randa's out. And he had an ability that he could use. It didn't make a lot of sense. It was hard to track. And so what we decided is really, again, like the movies, they sort of pop in for these big moments where they're affecting things, but they're not like on the screen the whole time running around driving a tank. So we put them in as these cards. And what was cool is because they're like, this is Bill Randa's moment, right? This is the
Yeah.
spotlight, the camera is on him, it's his close up. So we made these effects really big
Hmm.
and really impactful in the game, and you get to decide when to play them. Like there's some,
Yeah.
like play them after you activate a troop or whatever. But when during the
Yeah.
game you get to play that is your choice, and so you're sort of holding to have the biggest impact with those cards. And then again, the other thing that was great is I was like, I just made a list. Someone made a list somewhere. I forget where it was. Maybe it was a comment or on BGG or something like that. Of like, here's
Oh
all
yeah. Yeah.
people. I was like, yeah, I think we got pretty much everybody.
Yep.
Even some people like, yes, this person appeared in the elevator in Godzilla King of the Monsters for about 5 minutes. That person's in the game. So I'm super excited. And then as you saw, so the very last thing is we had this art. We're like, oh, we want to get these cool characters in there. Samuel L. Jackson's in the game. How cool is that, right? But right before we did, they said, hey, we can't actually let you use the likenesses on the campaign page. Oh, it was only okay, good. I can't let you put the likenesses on the campaign page because we need to get a third level of approval from their agents, which is
Oh
not
yeah.
going to
Yeah.
be an issue for final production, but it just couldn't get done before launch. So one of the things we're actually working on doing is giving them a sort of a whole slew of all these people that we've done and see if there's any sort of easy ones that they can get so we can actually show some of the art because it is amazing. I think Brian on the team said he saw some of this art and he was like, oh, this looks like a still, but it's not a still, it's actual art and just looks really
Yeah.
great. And the likenesses are uncanny. I don't even want to talk about the character cards. All I know, I was really passionate about
Sure.
that.
Well,
The mic there, but go ahead.
like, really briefly, the way that they work in the context of the game, like Justin said, when you trigger them, they create this giant moment that's essentially inspired by what that character did or who they were during the film. And a lot of these characters do have big moments, big things that they do. So giving them their opportunity to sort of change the landscape of the game. So, but letting you as the player dictate when that happens is part of it. So you're kind of creating your own little emergent story out of the mix. The way you get them during the course of the game is you start the game with one, and then as you progress through the game, the Titan has a little evolution track on their board that gives you additional cards throughout the course of the game. So you're going to be getting, as you progress, you're going to be getting more and more of them. Nicely enough, because we want everything to be really, really modular and to give as much variety and to give a unique experience to most of the games that you play. With one core game, you're going to start with cards that are recommended for each faction. Just start with, so you don't have to do a lot of decision making. But there is a system in which you can get all of your character cards together and just kind of to create a unique set of character cards for that game for you. So yes, you could have what's his name, Colonel Alan Jonah, working for the super species faction this time around instead of for the mercenaries. You can kind of mix and match them to get as much of a unique play as you like.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I really like about it is because we could make the effects a little bigger once we put them to like once per game. It
Yeah.
will also let us make them much more thematic. So I bet if I asked you like, what do you think Colonel Alan Jonah's card does, you might have a good guess. Or like,
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure you know what Ishiro Serizawa's card is going to do, right? Like, what's his biggest moment in the movies?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? That's on his card. So it's cool. So a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Bill Nye the Play asks, it seems like Godzilla will not cross over to Unmatched, but was this just due to a specific size or are large fighters dying with T-Rex? Oh, this is such a tee up. Thank you, Suzanne. Suzanne knows I love to do spoilers. So I will say this. Godzilla is not coming. He's too big. He's not large. He's Titanic, right? But we are developing right now, in development. I can't say what it's for or what's set or anything like that, but we are working on another large fighter. I don't know if it'll get there, but that's the plan. So we'll see. So I would
That's
say the short
actually,
answer is they're not out of Unmatched. We just
yeah,
still haven't found a good one to bring back in, but we think we found one.
that's actually the first unmatched deck that I worked on too. So
Yes, that's true. Willie Man says, working with Legendary, did you exclusively learn anything new about the MonsterVerse or Godzilla in universe knowledge? Who will be the new villain kaiju? First of all, I couldn't tell you if I knew, but I don't know. Like they did, we do not have that level of information yet. I will say again, I'm going out to the licensing expo. I'm going to be meeting with them. My guess is I'll get some information about the upcoming plan, but I didn't even know what it was called or anything about it. We sort of have been working based on. Now, the one thing we do get is the IP Bible, right? They give you this MonsterVerse Bible, and it does have a lot of information in there. I would say some of it is probably not public. It's sort of just sort of background lore or whatever, but nothing like earth shattering. Just sort of like, oh, that's kind of cool. Nothing like this person's secretly working for Monarch, but they're or anything like that. Unfortunately, nothing super cool like that. But we'll see when I get back from Vegas. I'll let you know. Fodor Gabor says, as far as I know for Unmatched, all the competitive play initiated from the player base, correct me if I'm wrong, it was intended. Have you considered the idea of competitive play while designing the game? So yeah, I will say that we thought that could arise with Unmatched, just given the nature of the game. But yeah, it was definitely driven by the player base, mostly because of speed. Like they were very quick about setting up all these things. Like very quickly, Unmatched League was set up. Unmatched Cards was set up. League, there were like game trackers set up and things like that. I wouldn't say we've designed around that, but Justin, you can probably speak to this idea of competitive play.
yeah, I think competitive play is certainly an option. Like obviously, like anybody can sit down and like let's host a tournament. Uh, Traditionally, I would say a lot of tournament type competitive games really try to focus and hone in on very specific, like very very tight design to make sure that it's the player's skill that shines through everything, that it is always going to be the most skilled player who wins the game. And I'm not saying that's not going to happen here with Battle Monsters, of course, but it is a big splashy game. Like a lot of the game is designed to be as epic and exciting and like spectacular as possible, and sometimes that does clash a little bit with a tournament type environment with very serious players, very chin stroking turns and such. If you'll let me speak to my past a little bit on this, to talk about a ancient project at this point. I worked on Imperial Assault back in 2014, and we added a competitive skirmish mode in addition to the one versus many campaign mode. And one of the big challenges we found is that the exciting and splashy nature of the campaign mode translated sometimes kind of poorly to the competitive mode, which created a little bit of a less interesting environment, which the very very smart developers managed to work through and keep it fresh. So it's still a possibility, but from my perspective, it's a interesting challenge at the very least.
Yeah, I want to jump back in here and say a couple things. First of all, I will say that to answer the question sort of more directly is we're certainly not designing it with an eye towards competitive play.
Yeah.
I think there's a chance it could arise organically. And I will say this doesn't just speak to the issue of competitive play, but to the depth of strategy in the game. It on the surface, it does not seem like as deep a game as maybe some other like very detailed, miniature war games with 180-page, hardbound rule books, and it's not. But Justin would kick my butt every time he played me right now because he's played so much more of this than I and Noah and Justin have been sort of taking the lead on this and have played so much more of this that they would kick Rob's and my butt, easily when we play. So there is definitely that ability to have expertise with the system, which is exciting. Like I think that's an important part of the game, especially again, we're asking you to take this game not just because it looks cool, but because it's a robust sort of dynamic play experience, and I think we really hit that part. All right, are we winding down? Of course, it wouldn't be anything without a request for an update on Omega Virus. I have the same answer, unfortunately, every time. It's proving a tough nut to crack. We've had some issues where we feel like we've gotten made some progress on it, but then we've had projects sort of jump up and unfortunately like push it back again a little bit. We have one very exciting project that just sort of fell into our lap. That is the most recent culprit that we are working on that we're going to be announcing later this year. But we are definitely committed to doing it. It's exciting. We're all excited about the project. It's just a matter because it's such a challenging design. I'm not spoiling. I'm just saying there is something that we're working on. It is a challenging design. I said it's funny. We was originally like the first thing we started working on after Dark Tower, and I was like, big electronic tower. We're never with an app. We're never doing that. That was so challenging. We're never going to do that again. And immediately jumped into Omega Virus, and of course, it proved to be challenging in the same way. But after many fits and starts, I feel like we actually have been making progress on it. Interestingly enough, Justin was the lead on that one until he sort of, maybe not the lead, but he sort of took over. Take a crack at it, kind of thing. And then,
I'm really excited to delve into that one again in the near future. It speaks to me on a personal level for the type of game that it is and the type of game we're trying to make it be. So.
Yeah, so Bill Nye is asking about classified character cards. I could certainly see other IPs. It seems it's a pretty core aspect of the system. So yeah, I would definitely see them in other IPs. Ethan Malone, what other kaiju would you have added from Godzilla if you could? We're just talking legendary. I don't know, you want to go first on this one, Justin?
I mean, Rodan is, I think, the really obvious one.
I like that. I like the new one. I like Shimu. I know. I didn't necessarily. Wasn't my favorite way that it was handled in the movie. I get it was good from a narrative standpoint, but I felt like we didn't get a great chance to see her sort of full abilities, and she's got some really cool powers. I think would have translated well and in an interesting way, as opposed to someone like Scar King, who I think is a very cool character in the movie. But I don't know how interesting he would have been. Maybe I bet that there's a way to do it with his sort of like. It didn't occur to me until I just said it, but maybe like his sort of authoritarian part where he's, part of his kid is like ruling other like titans or something. I don't know. I've got some ideas now, like a 3-part something. I don't know. I don't want to jump the gun here.
Tiamat in the ice doesn't play a huge role in New Empire, but I just like the look a lot.
Yeah.
And the question is about like all swimming all the time or whatever, but still just.
Good question, Willie, man. That's something we haven't actually shown a lot about. Is what about the board maps? Why don't you talk about that, Justin?
Yeah, so in total, there's 2 gigantic maps in each of the sets, and they're formed, as you said before, about 2 6-panel boards side by side that are double-sided. So one side's going to be, for example, in the Godzilla King, or I'm gesturing off screen. You can't see that. That's fine. Is right? Or is it?
Well, now that you said it, I can't remember. Yeah.
It's
I can't remember. One of them's for the retailers, and the other one is in Antarctica. Now that you
right. So one of them's kind of an Antarctic tundra map that's a little bit more wide open. It's the most wide open, least like kind of terrain focused, and then the other side of that board is Boston. So immediately there's a big difference. There's a giant river going through Boston, a lot more water spaces, which has an impact on your troops when they try to go through it. On the other side, we've got for the other set, we've got Hong Kong, which has a much bigger dividing river with a lot more bridges, and so you have fewer places where your troops can kind of collect, and moving them as strategic groups is a little bit more challenging. So it creates a very different feel from that as well. And then finally, there's an underground, a hollow earth map that has some of those really, really cool crystal pillars that you see in particular in New Empire that become completely impassable. So every single map has kind of different arrangements of its terrain, different types of terrain, and then of course you scatter all of the different buildings and resource sites and energy sites amongst all of that to create a little bit of a slightly different feel to it. And of course, with like the crystal pillars and the rivers, like the rivers, you can, as the Titans, you can punt troops into them and they'll flounder a little bit. And in the Hollow Earth one, you can slam Titans into those crystal pillars and they won't break, and that's always a lot of fun too.
Yeah, I think it's sort of similar to Unmatched approach we take with maps on Unmatched, is that for each one we wanted a sort of more straightforward map, but then also one with sometimes we'll throw in like a map mechanic. And then in general, I would say, I don't know that we've talked about this, but the Godzilla versus King Ghidorah set we position as like more of a entry level, maybe not entry level is not the right, but more straightforward, I guess you would say, approach, both in terms of giving the Outpost 32 map, which is pretty vanilla. Like it's like, here, if you want a wide open brawl, this is the one you want to use. And then the other maps are a little more interesting. And in the same way for the other set, Kong versus Mechagodzilla, Mechagodzilla is a little bit more of an intricate character. Those maps are a little bit more intricate, things like that. So give players this sort of a dynamic option there. Alrighty. Sue's question coming, maybe. There we go. Board Game Animal. What was it like balancing the Titans and abilities, how they play? After Unmatched, was it pretty easy to approach that? Was it a challenge, or did that come relatively organically? I would say that Unmatched did not help at all.
Yeah. Pick me. I
just don't want to put you under any trauma here, Justin, but go ahead and answer that question.
So no matter how many games you make, no matter how many, every single game's development, the effects, not just the design, because the design is its own animal, but the development of all the individual pieces is a fresh challenge. Now, experience plays a role in learning how quickly something sucks. That's probably the biggest thing, is like when you've made a lot of things, you can identify what sucks and why very quickly. But learning how to develop for a game is a process in itself. And very little of that process is translatable from one game to another, because what works in one game, what's the key strategy in one game, is not going to apply to another one. And what's going to be fun in one game is not necessarily going to apply to the other one either. So in terms of balancing the Titans, in terms of how they play, the goal was to make them all feel as different as possible, to give you that kind of variety in experience that we're looking for. And so how it came about to create that was to make something, to play it, to discover what was fun and what was not, and then do that again, like 30 times now? Something like that. But it's always a fresh process, and it's always a unique challenge with every single game, because every single game's got its own little quirks and own little bits and pieces of design.
Yeah, there were no, for those who will get this reference, there were no Winter Soldiers in Battle Monsters, I'm afraid.
Yep.
So, and I think we're gonna wrap that up and see if there's any last minute questions. I do see one little last comment as we're heading, is talking about releasing other skins or sculpts for the Titans. Oh, there's Mothra makes an appearance.
Yeah.
Cameo. Yeah, so here's a question, but I thought that was a cool question. I would totally love to do that. That would be pretty cool. So yeah, again, that was one of the things we had to decide, like for Kong, are we doing him with his Beast Glove or not? And we decided, it's the newer one. It gives us some cool stuff to play with on some of his rage cards and things like that. And there's Kong, which, by the way, that sculpt has now gotten redone, FYI.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think, again, these are all things we'd love to do. Assuming the game's successful, would love to explore all the different ways we can work with it. So yeah. And so again, I think we're going to wrap up. I do want to thank everyone for joining us today. I want to thank Suzanne and Beth behind the scenes. Thank you, Justin, for coming on and spending your afternoon with us. I guess morning for you. And appreciate it. So thank you for checking out the campaign.
Yeah.
And we're over there in the comments too. So feel free to continue the conversation over there if you have any more questions. And until next time, rage. Have a good one, everybody.